Playing new Katy Perry.
Cozy little Christmas here with you. Ooh, I'll bestow it upon.
Hello guys and welcome to the stream. My name's Luke084BL084.
Frightening forces are at work in our world, ready to wreak havoc with our very existence. Who or what prowls the halls of the Empire State University after dark? None other than the master of illusion himself, the menacing Mysterio. The tablet of order and chaos. Selling you on the black market is gonna make me a million.
Good, you can use it, Vince. I can smell your breath from here.
Spider-Man?
Wait, how would you eat a mint through that fishbowl? Nice! Don't get me wrong, your illusions are niche, but if you ask me, they could use a little more kick. Nah, souvenirs are available in the gift shop.
Stop it! Cease your incessant prattling!
Incessant is the best kind of prattling.
What's this?
Hey, Bubblehead, think fast. Okay, can somebody tell me what's going on here?
Spider-Man, you are needed.
Madam Web? As if this night wasn't strange enough already.
The tablet of order and chaos is the most powerful of all the mystic artifacts in the world, and you shattered it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Guess they don't make tablets like they used to, huh?
The pieces are now fragmented across other dimensions that are strange reflections of our own, a past unlike ours, a present day out of sync, and a distant future which may or may not come to pass.
Is that a cartoon pig?
Focus. I require your help. Yours and the help of these 3 other Spider-Men. The heroes into whose realities the tablet fragments fell.
Whoa, slow down. Other realities? Other me's?
Yes, I have explained our dire situation to them. They will be your allies in this quest.
But I'm the most charming, right?
You must gather all the pieces of the tablet before they fall into the wrong hands, or our reality, as well as theirs, will be utterly destroyed.
Yeah, right. No pressure.
And that's where I'll pause that, guys. That is the kind of vein where the Spider-Verse, which is what I believe and what I remember as this Madam Web, not the one that's in the films. And I thought with a treat I would open with that. But we are going to be listening to Comic Historian again, which are these guys.
What comes as standard?
That's an advert. So ignore that, guys. That's got nothing to do with me. Blah, 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 blah.
Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break
This
them
is
down.
Comic Historian, guys. I'll let them give them an intro.
Dramatically back to it. In a dramatic fashion, like it's a motion movie. Guys, the Spider-Man game is out. To celebrate, we're doing Spider-Man content right here on Comic Story the entire weekend.
The aim of today is Spider Noir and other Spider-Man.
A book that a lot of you have requested and I haven't done for a very long time. And I do my old, really cool 1930s old-timey accent for it. But to further celebrate this whole thing, what we're doing, guys, is celebrating over on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/EligibleMonster. You come on over and join us during, literally right now, when this video is live, you'll find us playing the Spider-Man game. And every hour, we're giving away Spider-Man merchandise from comic books to toys to video games. You can also engage in the comments down below, and we're giving away stuff to some YouTube people as well. Watch our video earlier in the week for more information on that. But if you're just watching this for Spider-Man Noir, let's get to that origin, shall we?
New York City, January 1933.
police rush into the office of J. Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle after getting a report that Jonah was shot. As the police push their way.
So that's Spider Noir comic story, guys. See that on the channel. See that name up there. Copy it down. Otherwise, it will be in a link down below. This is who I'm going to be listening to while I draw. I'm going to be using actually in the snug again, and I'm using my main TV so you can actually see what I'm drawing while I'm doing this live on my free app called Critter. I found this works a lot better, but issues is it can't stay here, so we'll be back to the way I normally would upload this. But as I know you guys haven't always been able to join me when I'm live, when I'm drawing, but you do like the digital format that I do use. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to do this maybe a couple of times a week, as well as drawing like I normally do on paper. But I thought, as it's that time of year, I'd give you a little bit of a treat and show you what and how what I listen to over when I'm drawing, especially when I'm drawing, when I'm using my pens and paper. But today we're going to use my PC, and yeah, it's all coming through the same screen. So give me a second too. I should have set the sound up, but I'm stupid and I didn't do that. So let's continue on listening to them. By turning my stereo on, I've got a strange setup in here, but it works so much more better.
They kick open the door with their guns drawn to see Jonah dead in his chair after being shot to death. The man responsible?
And I'm going to get on with drawing, so I'm going to flip over the channel.
His gun, looking at the officers.
And
one
get
of the
onto the
officers shouts
PC.
that that's him. He shot Jameson. Spider-Man quickly webs up one of the officers and jumps out the window. But as
And
another
then,
runs
carry on
towards the
drawing
window, he
from what I
begins
was
to fire.
drawing.
One of the bullets grazes the side of Spider-Man's arm, but ultimately, he manages
If you want to leave a
get
comment
away.
at
3
any
weeks
point,
prior,
guys,
he was
you can
not
do by
Spider-Man.
hitting that live
No one even
chat.
had an idea about what was to come over the city
Over
down
in the
below
corner.
on Riverside Drive.
Or if
Daily
you're
Bugle
here watching
reporter
back, you
Ben
can leave
Urich
one down below.
arrives to take
If
shots
you
of
want to
the
know
SWAT
and
team
want
built
links
up
to
a
where
tiny
you're
little
listening to
shanty
and
town
what you've
along
seen
the
so
Hudson.
far, you
Jonah
can
told
do
us to
by
get the pictures
asking
of the
me
broken
down
man and help us with the
down below
snot-nosed
again in
filthy
the
rags.
comments, or
Take
right
pictures
beside
that'll
that comment
make people
section
weep.
is the
Urich
subscribe button.
asks
If you're
one of
new
the
to the channel,
squatters
why
if
not
he could
hit
take a picture.
subscribe?
And the man
My
asks,
name is
what does he represent? Urich
Loot084
tells him the Bugle. So the man opens up his coat, showing newspaper strapped to him for heat, stating that the Bugle's got some good paper. Front
Art
pages on his
and
chest,
games.
sports pages
Here
in
every
his
day on
shoes.
YouTube.
He saved the financial
Occasionally on
section
Mixer,
to wipe his
but
teeth.
every day
As
at
the man
night.
laughs, Urich notices a
Over
woman standing on
on
a
Instagram.
soapbox and a group of people around her. He asks what's going on over there. The woman says that that's May Parker, rousing the comrades again, letting the ruling classes tremble. The proletarians have nothing to lose but the chains. Urich walks over thinking that he's heard of her, but this is the first time that he's seen her in person. May tells the people how the government promised their jobs were secure, but more than 13 million of them are out of work now. The only thing the Republicans and the Democrats are discussing is the most efficient way to turn their sweat and blood into profit. As May goes on, a well-dressed man from the crowd says, "Get off your soapbox, Grandma." That man, Fancy Dan, and two with them are the enforcers, the mobster Goblin's muscle. Dan tells May that if she doesn't like things here in America, she should get on a boat and go join her comrades in Russia. May says the last time that she checked, the Constitution of this country protected her right to freedom of speech. The man then tells the larger man with a box to go ahead and help the old woman down. However, May's nephew Peter jumped in front of him shouting, "If you lay a finger on my aunt!" Before Peter could get another word out, Ox gut punches Peter, telling him, "It's way past your bedtime, kid." May shouts to let him go, but the other enforcer, Montana, cracks his whip, wrapping May up. Just then Urich's voice tells the three of them, "Say cheese," and there's a flash of light. Dan looks over, stating, "Would you look at that? Ben Urich poking his nose in the muck as usual." Ox grabs Urich by the jacket, telling him, "I'll just smash up your camera of yours." And Dan stops him, telling him, "Urich is off limits. You know that." After Ox lets him go, Dan tells Urich, "You better be careful. You're pushing your luck." As the three leave, Urich helps Peter up, asking if he's okay, and Peter mumbles, telling him, "Yeah, fine." And May tells Urich, "Thanks for helping." Urich tells them both that they're very welcome. His car is just down the way. Please allow him to give them a ride home. A short while later, over at the Bowery Welfare Center, Urich asks if this is the hotbed of the revolution. And May says that it's what the sign says, a welfare center. They give the homeless a hot meal and a place to come out of the cold. Urich laughs, telling him, "Seems like a little too much socialism for some people." Peter points to the fence where some of the things are stored, stating, "We had to put those things up after my uncle was killed by Goblin's mobster." May tells him that they don't know if it was Goblin's men who did it. And Peter says, "I know it." Once May leaves, Peter says, "Damn it! Why do these gangsters gotta come after us? It's the system that we're attacking. The corrupted banks, the businesses, the politicians." Urich listens to Peter go on and thinks to himself that He should just get in the car. He should drive away. But there's something about this kid's sheer, stubborn, righteous anger. Maybe he wanted to test him, to show him the brutal reality of the world, to watch that light in his eyes die out. After another short drive, Ulrich takes Peter down an alleyway, stating that he really hopes that he's not a prohibitionist, because he's about to enter the hottest speakeasy in town. Welcome to the Black Cat. The doors swing open, and inside is an underground bar. Black Cat's owner, Felicia Hardy, asks Ulrich if he's babysitting. Now, who's the kid? Ulrich tells her that he's Peter Parker. Don't mind the bruises. He got into an argument with Ox. Peter, meet the owner of this fine establishment, as well as the only woman that I've ever asked to marry me, which, God knows why, she turned me down. Felicia calls out to one of the waitresses, stating to clear out Ulrich's table and get him a drink. Ulrich laughs, telling them to make it a whiskey, double on the rocks, and a soda for the kid. Peter says that he'll take a whiskey, and Felicia stares, asking, are you old enough to be drinking? Peter tells her, I'll show you my birth certificate when you show me your liquor license. Felicia smiles, telling him that the kid's got a mouth on him, and Ulrich tells her he gets it from his aunt. Once the two sit, Peter asks, why did the Goblin thugs back off when you showed up? They said that you were off limits. Ulrich says, power of the press, I'm guessing, but that's why I brought you here. By the way you and your aunt are talking. But Peter cuts him off, telling him, we should keep our mouths shut. Aunt May believes in something, and I believe in it. Ulrich stops him. That's all good and all. Believe that if we all became good little socialists and worked toward the greater good, that it'll be all sunshine and roses. That's a hell of a dream, but take a good look. This is reality, kid. The guy wrestling with the brunette, that's Jimmy Strider, mayor of New York. And that dame is not his wife. To his left is the chief detective, Rian, from the Vice Squad. The creepy schmoozin', that's Emilio Alcuno, runs half the brothels in New York. Then there's Aldorfus Cray in the industrials, and your Uncle Ben helped organize demonstrations that closed 3 of Crane's sweatshops last year. And the one in the center of it all, that's Norman Osborn, the Goblin. You want to know why the Goblin is after you? The truth is, the Goblin doesn't give a damn about you or anyone else. He's freelance and he works for whoever is the highest bidder. They use him because it wouldn't look good to have the police suppressing freedom of speech. Peter then asks, so you're saying that the mayor used the Goblin to kill Uncle Ben? And Ulrich tells him, it was probably Alcuno who made the deal. And Crane most likely put up the fee. Rian probably made sure the cops were looking the other way, and the mayor just sits back taking a percentage. It's a tangled web that they weave. Peter then asks, why do they call him the Goblin? And Ulrich tells him, no one really knows. Likely because his enforcers that he chose came from every broken circus freak show that he could find. The classy man with the monkey, that's Craven. He was an animal trainer. The bald one's Vulture. He's a geek. The Goblin found him caged up, biting the heads off living chickens. Just then, Fancy Dan walks up to Ulrich's table, telling them, look what the cat dragged in. Behind him, Norman walks up, telling him, good evening, Ulrich. And Parker, is it? Your uncle was Ben Parker, the agitator? Please accept my deepest consolidations for the unfortunate death. Ben was torn apart by, what was it? A pack of dogs? Peter grits his teeth, stating, my uncle was murdered by a low-life scum, and you are not fit to even say his name. Peter then takes his glass and throws it at Norman, but the Vulture opens his mouth and hits him. So Norman holds it back, telling him, not here. Norman wipes his face off, telling Ulrich, you better teach your young friend some manners. He is your friend, right? Ulrich gets up, telling him, oh yes, he's my friend. Come on, Peter. We've overstayed our welcome here. A few moments later, the bouncer throws Peter out, and Felicia tells Ulrich, you know the rules. Don't bring your squabbles into the Black Cat. The kid can come back when he's grown up. As the door slams shut, Ulrich says, what you just did, and there was the stupidest single thing that I have ever witnessed. Do you realize what you... And Peter stops him and asks, what? And Ulrich stops. He fights back the urge to put Peter down himself, but he says, it's nothing, I'll take you home now. Peter tells him, I got the message. You wanted me to see what was going on in here, and it can't be fought against. But I will never close my eyes and run away. Ulrich then asks, you want to do something? Really make a difference? And a short while later, at J. Jonah Jameson's office, Jonah tells Peter, sit down. Ulrich has told me that you're a good kid. Said you're an orphan. Lost your uncle, too. Ben Parker was a fine man. A little red around the gills for my liking, but still. So you want to study what? Science? But you can't afford college? Well, you can make do with a job here in the meantime. Peter tries to say no, but Jonah asks him, did you know that there's a married couple living under the bridge in Central Park because they have nowhere else to go? There's children starving in the middle of the richest nation that has ever existed. There's a million sob stories out there, and none of them are special until we make it special. Ulrich has a unique talent. He knows how to put words and pictures together. A picture can be worth 10,000 words, and it's coming from a man who makes a career on words. As Jonah pushes the two of them out of his office, Peter tells him, I don't really know what to do. And Ulrich stops him, telling him, don't worry, you just got to be better than the guy setting up the gear. You're not a photographer. Not yet, at least. After all, as Ulrich went to take out his pictures, Peter was there to help set up the lights and everything else, and he got a chance to see what really happened out there. The poor living on the streets, the families with 5 or more children living in a single room, the man who hung himself so he wouldn't have to pay the goblin and leave his wife alone. However, the man was wrong. He still had a debt, and now his wife would have to pay. After that, Peter opened up. He really opened up. As Ulrich and Peter sit in a diner, Peter looks at his coffee, stating, that widow, she knew who to blame. Everyone knows what the goblin is doing, but everyone is too scared to do anything. No one sees or hears anything. One day, someone has to talk. It's all it's going to take. Just 1 or 2 people with the guts to tell the truth, and Goblin will be finished. Peter went on. That night that my uncle died, it was me who found him. There were rope marks. He was tied up so they couldn't fight back, and after they beat him, they set the wild dogs on him and tore him apart. Urge listens, but this is old news to him. The only thing that he didn't know was that Peter was the one who found the mutilated body. Later that night, Ben heads home, still thinking to himself that he had it bad, but Peter, he's known loss his entire life. The truth is, Peter has every reason to be bitter at the world. Urge opens the drawer to his desk, taking out a small bag, and he begins to heat up a spoon. He then takes out a needle, sucks up the liquid, and injects it into his arm. He leans back as the heroin goes through him, telling himself, Peter is wrong about one thing. It wasn't the dogs that tore Uncle Ben apart. It was that freak vulture. After being treated like an animal for so long, something in Adrian Toombs just snapped. He developed a taste for human meat. And how would he know Ben Parker's body was cannibalized? Because God help him, he was there, and he watched it all. As the weeks passed by while taking pictures of a burning building, Ulrich begins to realize something. Peter's passion for justice just started to get to him. He began to feel anger when they would report on things that they knew were not an accident. This building did just burst into flames, but this was the owner cashing in on insurance money. While Ulrich begins to develop photos, Peter watches Ulrich, telling him that he's not even shocked that this is happening anymore. Ulrich sighs, telling him that he's too tired. You can't spend your life being disgusted and outraged. It'll just make you go crazy. Whether or not today's fire was an accident or not, there's nothing that they can prove. Peter takes a closer look at one of the photos, telling him that the proof is right here. Fancy Dan is in one of the photos that we took. We can just take this to the cops and get an investigation going. Ulrich tells him that there's no point. Everyone in the city gets a cut. Cops, insurance investigators, everyone. And it doesn't stop there. It goes all the way to the top. There's no one who could even talk that would have any power to do anything. Peter then says that he knows his Uncle Ben was a pilot in the Great War. He said that there was no reason to be fighting, no great cause. It was a war or markets. The old colonial empires carved up the new world. They sent out boys by the millions to die, all to safeguard their profits. He also said that if those in power can't be trusted, it's the responsibility of the people to remove them. Ulrich begins taking down the photos, telling Peter that that's a nice speech and all, but while they're waiting for the revolution, maybe they could get these pictures over to the Bugle. Peter grabs the envelope, telling him, yeah, right. The public must have its daily dose of misery, huh? As he leaves, Ulrich looks back at the photo with Fancy Dan, excluding it from the ones given to Peter. Later at Ulrich's apartment, Peter runs in stating that they made the late edition. Isn't that great? Ben sits in his chair, not responding, and as Peter looks down, he sees the heroin needle. Just then, Ben's phone rings, and since Ben can't respond, Peter picks it up, asking, hello? The voice on the other line says, is that you, Spider? It's the Fly, and I got a hot one for you. The action's going off at 1 o'clock in the a.m. at Rui's Import Warehouse at Pier 57. Goblin's goons are picking up a shipment of antiques that went awry. It's going to be the usual terms. 40 clams if you use it or not, gotta blow. Peter hangs up the phone, stating, Spider, what was Ulrich up to? At 1 o'clock at the pier, Montana looks at one of the statues of the Spider God and asks why the hell did Goblin want this junk? Fancy Dan tells him it's for his personal collection. He's got a thing for the voodoo mumbo-jumbo and all that weird stuff. The Bugle put out an article about this one, though. Said anyone who touches it dies from a curse. Craven then says, that's enough talking. Get the statues loaded. Fancy Dan, Ox, and Montana begin to lift the crate up. And as Fancy takes a step back, he slips, dropping the crate. The Spider God's statue inside cracks, and from inside, a swarm of spiders swarm out covering him. He screams, get him off! Get him off! They're biting me! And while this happens, Peter is watching from the rafters. Craven grabs a hose to wash Dan off, but when Montana takes a closer look, he says that he's dead. Those spiders killed Dan! While this is all happening, Peter notices one of the spiders crawled up and bit him on the hand. He tells himself not to scream, and the spider bites again. Peter struggles to keep his scream quiet, but then something happens. Everything around him begins to fade, and then the Spider God appears before him. The Spider God asks, why did you tremble so? Our bites only bring death to those of evil intent. For you, it will be a greater torment. The curse of power. Peter blacks out after hearing those words, and a short while later he finds himself opening his eyes, looking up, finding himself upside down. He says, oh God. And when he moves, he feels himself covered in the spider's web. He pulls the webbing off and he climbs up, and then he senses something. A few moments later, he jumps off the ledge and easily moves from beam to beam until he lands on the floor. He looks back up at the height that he just came from and then at his hand, stating, "Well, I'll be damned." The next morning, Urich grabs his things and heads over to Osborne Enterprises. It wasn't hard to find because the piece of garbage Goblin thinks he's untouchable. Urich walks up to the doors and one of the guards tells Urich that he will be seen in 5 minutes. Next time, make a goddamn appointment. Urich waits the time, and as he walks into Norman's office, he looks at all of the taxidermied animals, and Norman asks, "What do you want?" "I pay you to stay out of my hair and not show up looking like a hobo. It's bad for the image." Urich tells him that he's going to assume that they heard about the fire the other night. And Norman tells him, yes, they did. Some drunk drops a cigarette, and Urich holds up the photo of Fancy Dan, telling him, "Just in case you didn't see, there's a clear shot of Fancy Dan at the scene." Norman laughs, telling him, "Fancy Dan no longer works for me, just so you know, and you're going to need better plans if you want to blackmail me." Urich then says, "I got plenty to take you down in your entire freak show." Norman looks at the photo again, telling him, "This is true. I'm a man that accepts facts over ideals. I will buy the snapshot this time. I know a man like you has needs, but you should take care not to push too far." Montana hands Urich a wad of cash, stating, "There's 50 skins to keep you snowed up for Christmas." I scram. Just then there's a loud crash, and a man in black jumps through Norman's window, kicking Craven to the ground. The man in black moves with such agility, taking everyone before stopping in front of Norman's desk. The man then tells Norman, "I'm here to give you a message. It all stops here. The extortion, the drugs, the prostitution, the protection racket, all of it." Norman laughs, telling Montana to shoot, but as Montana takes out his gun, the man shoots out a web from his wrist, pinning that man down. He then grabs Norman, lifts him out of his chair, and Norman asks, "What are you going to do? Beat me up? Arrest me? The only way to stop me would be to kill me. Can you do that?" The man tries to say something, but his eyes wander, and he notices Urich's photo, and then he stares directly at Urich. Urich runs out of the building and into the streets, but before he can get far, the man in black jumps in front of him. The man then grabs Urich by the jacket, shouting, "How could you? How could you be working for Goblin and taking his filthy money? You're drunk and a junkie, and he bought you. He bought you like a dog." The man lets go, stating, "That voice, Peter? Wait, let me explain." Peter turns and makes his escape, telling him, "To stay away from me. I never want to see your lying face again." As Peter runs down the alley, Norman and his goons run up shooting. However, Peter effortlessly dodges the bullets and jumps up the walls and onto the rooftops. Once the firing stops, Norman looks at Urich, telling him, "You still here? Use those connections you have to find out who that lunatic in the mask is and earn yourself a nice bonus." Urich gets up grabbing the money that he was given, and he throws it, telling him that he doesn't work for him anymore. He doesn't want his money. This thing that they have is finished. He picks up his hat and he begins to walk off. And Norman says, "Now that sounds like a man with nothing to lose. A man with nothing to lose is very, very dangerous." Montana then asks if he should pop it, and Norman says, "Not yet. We need to know where he's keeping those files." Urich may think that he has the upper hand, but the Goblin always gets 2 steps ahead. Later that night, Urich pours himself a glass, telling Betty over the phone to put him through to Jonah. A few seconds later, Jonah picks up, asking, "What is it? What do you want?" Urich says that he's got a big one, Jonah. "This is a Pulitzer material. It's going to blow the whole damn town apart." Jonah tells him that he doesn't have time for games. What's the story? So Urich puts his glass down, stating that the Goblin, "I can get you the Goblin." Jonah asks him, "Are you serious?" And Urich tells him, "I am dead serious. I have it all. Names, dates, photographs. I can put him in the frame for dozens of murders all over New York." And Jonah asks, "Where are you?" Urich tells him that he's in his apartment, and Jonah tells him, "If you really have what you say, you cannot be on the street with that. Just stay there. I'll be right over." Urich looks up at his defeated self in the mirror, stating, "Yeah, they're going to make him weep." He hangs up and he holds his glass, telling himself that he's doing the right thing. Tonight, he's burying the spider. He's taking back his life. After a while, there's a knock at Urich's door, and as Urich opens it, he sees a gun pointed right at him, and it goes off. Also at this time, back at Peter's apartment, he goes through Uncle Ben's old war chest. He takes out his old uniform, and he begins to stitch together a mask. Thinking about what his uncle used to say, even though he was awarded medals, he never felt like a hero. He hid his uniform because he was ashamed of it, because the war that he fought was not just. Peter grabs one last thing from the trunk, Uncle Ben's old gun, and over at Urich's apartment, Jonah picks up the phone, stating it's done. The spider is dead. But at that exact moment, Peter is standing on the rooftop, stating, "This is it, Goblin. Here comes the Spider-Man." And there you have it, the origins of Spider-Man Noir. Now, don't forget to subscribe, as we will be getting to the conclusion of this story very, very soon. But to just elaborate on what I opened this video with, our Spider-Man Weeb Weekend. You see, what we're going to do is, if you engage in this video and talk in the comments down below, then we're going to find the most engaging individual, someone who helped all the people who wanted to know about all the Spider-Man stuff. So you can help them out, and we're going to find somebody and send you a message directly to your YouTube as quick as possible. and we're going to basically send you PlayStation cash so you can buy a copy of the game.
Which is what Comic Story had done, guys.
Or
I'm
when
actually
you're watching
searching
this,
around
the
for my
time it
remote.
went live, you could go over to our Twitch, twitch.tv/
That is Comic Story, and guys, so going over to their channel on Comic Story on YouTube, and I will be listening to more of their stuff. I just need to swap over. Hopefully you have liked my picture of Spider Noir. I'm going to be tweaking them a little bit more later on in this coming year. I'm going to be doing it every single day, like I do normally, but I'm going to be trying to do this in the evening as well as in the daytime, as what I normally like to do is draw on paper. So what I'll be doing is drawing in normal paper and keeping it Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday for the inking stage and the sketching stage on Monday. Tuesday will be the drawing stage, inking stage, and Wednesdays I will always be the colouring in with Copic markers and also other things. So don't forget to tune in on those days. If you can't do that, on a Saturday and Sunday I'm also over on Main Maker channel, so I will not be uploading or going live. So don't forget over the weekends to check over and what's going up into the new year. There will be a few more videos being broadcasted, but these are to keep you tidy and keep you going up until the new year, because I've got some more technology coming to my channel, because I'm not just art, I'm also games. So don't forget to tune in and keep tuned. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and don't forget to look for loads of other content to do with Spider-Man. But again, I'm not always Spider-Man. I work with other people, so if you guys want a requested video or requested thing to draw or learn how to draw, let me know in the comment section and I'll get to do that. I always digitize, but this seems to be a better way to be digitizing, so I'm going to be doing it from now on as well. And like I said, in the evenings, if I'm not gaming, then hopefully I'll be doing drawings like this and loads of other art projects. Again, don't forget to hit subscribe. My name is Blute084. Spider-Man is going to be awesome coming into the new year. I am going to be looking now for what we call Scarlet Spider. Let's go all the way. Scarlet. Probably haven't spelled that right. We'll have Spider, because that's what we're going to be doing next. But hopefully we'll be able to find something to do with the comic story again through this, because I do like to listen to them, because as you heard, they're pretty good, I must admit. Origin, we might have that. There we go. Oh, we got Comics Explained. They're just as good, and they give you a little bit more information than just showing you what it is. But yeah, we'll be listening to them. That's not my effort, so let's get rid of that.
Rob Core. I know some of you guys are probably just like, oh.
Sorry about that, guys. I'll just plug the sound into the.
It's a perfect example of what happens when a publisher runs away with a story and makes it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Like 95% of the stuff that happens in Clone Saga doesn't matter, but there's like 5% that does. And the stuff that does matter is extremely important. So what we're going to do is we basically condense the Clone Saga down. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this in 4 videos. All right, the first video, the one we're doing now, is going to focus on Ben Reilly. The second video is going to focus on Kane. The third video is going to be the trial of Peter Parker, which is where everything kind of comes to a head. And then we're going to do the conclusion. Now, my ability to do this Clone Saga video comes by way of Sal over at Comic Pop. So you guys need to go over to his channel and say, what's up, sub, check out his videos, that kind of thing. But he's like the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Spider-Man that I know of, because he's been reading it forever. So, I mean, like, he was born and raised on Spider-Man. And so because of that, I went to him and I said, okay, look, if like Clone Saga was released today and it was like a 12 or 13, 15, 20 issue story, whatever it is, a limited series, what stories would there be to comprise buys that limited series. And he's like, I see where you're going. So he sends me like a list of like 16 comics that matter. And I was like, okay, cool. So I just kind of, went through and, added bits and pieces and subtracted bits and pieces and so on. But it's made it possible for us to actually do this. So here's the deal about Clone Saga. Clone Saga goes all the way back to 1975, really the mid-1970s. But the caveat to this is that there's two of them. When people say, man, I hate Spider-Man Clone Saga, they're talking about the second Clone Saga. They're not talking about the first one. The first one was pretty short. It wasn't a great big, huge, drawn-out thing. It was really just like the introduction of Miles Warren, the Jackal, and it was fallout of the night Gwen Stacy died. So back in 1971, really one of the landmark stories in the comic book industry as a whole was Jerry Conway killing off Gwen Stacy. Never before had something like that happen. It was huge. The night Gwen Stacy died was groundbreaking because it was unheard of for a superhero not to save his love interest. Ever since Superman swooped down and saved Lois Lane when she first fell off a building, it was a mainstay that the superhero, the main guy, always saved his love interest. She may have come close to dying. He may have gotten there in the nick of time, right before the bullet hit her, but she always lived. Gwen Stacy dying changed all that. Not only that, it also introduced the possibility that Peter Parker was the reason for why she died. When she was knocked off the top of the bridge, Peter Parker shot his web sling. The yank effect basically broke her neck, or at least some people say it did. But regardless, his love interest died, and it set in motion the idea that comic books could now be darker, that they could be grittier. The night when Stacy died set the groundwork for The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. That's why we got that story, is because we now had the ability to do darker stories. The fallout to this within the realm of the Spider-Man comics was that we were introduced to a guy by the name of Miles Warren. And Miles Warren was basically, at least as he was introduced, was just a professor. He was just a regular guy. Now, his backstory wasn't really explained until the end of the original Clone Saga. All that really happened was that we essentially had Gwen Stacy re-emerging. And it was kind of crazy because at the time what this did is it focused on the nature of Peter Parker, and it focused on the idea that Gwen Stacy may very well still be alive. But of course, in his mind, there's no way it could have been true. She had to have been a clone, that kind of a thing. Now, of course, this inevitably led to a conflict between Peter and the Jackal, Miles Warren. And it was kind of a cool scenario. It was kind of a cool situation in the sense that they were just kind of, beating each other up and carrying on. And, the idea of Miles Warren holding this grudge that he never fully explained to Peter. Now, at the conclusion of the original Clone Saga, which took place in the Amazing Spider-Man 149, really, I guess the conclusion was kind of fleshed out over the course of 150 and 151. But at the end of Amazing Spider-Man number 149, what was revealed to us is that there was a guy named Anthony Serba. And this guy was, again, a scientist or, a guy working alongside Miles Warren. But it basically seemed as though Anthony Serba and Miles Warren were working on cloning technology. Anthony Serba was successful in the idea of cloning a frog. And in turn, Miles Warren got the idea of cloning 2 DNA samples. Now, we didn't know exactly who they were, but of course, we ended up finding out that it belonged to Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. Now, of course, when Anthony Serba basically realized that it was 2 humans, he was going to alert the authorities. Miles Warren freaked out, tried to stop him, and accidentally killed him in the process. And what this did is it created a psychotic break in the mind of Miles Warren in the sense that he began to distance his own actions and creating a fictional person to have essentially done it, saying, well, the Jackal was the one who did it, not me, the Jackal, and so on and so forth. But by going through and cloning Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, the first person to pop up was Gwen herself. Now, of course, Gwen was basically taken by Miles Warren, and she was indoctrinated, or at least had all the memories of her original self pulled out. Now, that was the whole basis behind the clones. The clones were created down to a T. So, the character that would later become Ben Reilly had all the memories of Peter Parker. This clone of Gwen Stacy has all the memories of Gwen Stacy. This was a trend that was basically reworked by Dan Slott in the Clone Conspiracy. But the fact remains here that we end up having Miles Warren kind of race off and that sort of thing. But before he does, what he basically says is that all this is rooted in the fact that Peter Parker was the one that got Gwen Stacy killed, or at least Miles Warren sees it that way. And in Miles' mind, he as a professor, and it's really kind of weird the way this is done, he as a professor had this sort of respect for Gwen Stacy's intelligence, the fact that she was so smart, the fact that she listened, but it also borderlined on romance in the sense that he may have genuinely been in love with her. At least at the time of this story, it was kind of ambiguous. But what ended up happening here is that with Peter Parker tracking Miles Warren down, this eventually led to a guy named Ned Leeds basically being taken prisoner, that kind of a thing, sort of used as bait or used as a hostage. And then when Peter Parker wakes up, he comes face to face with himself. Now, this is a pretty early indication of Ben Reilly, and the conflict is pretty fast in the sense that Peter basically is able to subdue Ben Reilly, or at least is able to go toe-to-toe with him, while all the while, Miles Warren and Gwen Stacy are watching everything unfold. Now, again, they've got like about a minute or two to go through this entire fight and for Peter to win and to free Ned Leeds. But ultimately, Gwen Stacy is the one that turns against the Jackal, basically gets him to come back to his normal self. The Jackal ends up freeing Ned Leeds, Leeds, but none of it matters because the bomb goes off. Of course, Gwen Stacy and Ned Leeds and Spider-Man are able to make their escape, only for the clone to have basically been killed in the explosion. Now, that wrapped up things pretty fast in terms of that original story. But what we're talking about as far as the whole, Amazing Spider-Man scenario goes, what this actually does is it picks up with a backup feature in Spectacular Spider-Man 223. And what this did is it basically focused on the life of Ben Reilly following the events of Amazing Spider-Man 149. What we had basically found out was that Peter Parker had looked around and come to the realization that if the clone, or if the body of the clone were to be discovered, somebody would unmask it and somebody would realize that it's Peter Parker, at the very least, draw the conclusion that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. And so because of that, the body of the clone was disposed of, only for the body to have survived. And so what this did is it set in motion two stories. The first was a story called The Lost Years, which really isn't relevant. I mean, it is insofar as like Ben Reilly was alive and what he was doing, but nothing good happens there. I mean, it's this short thing and it's not very interesting at all. But with regards to this story, what this does is it tells us how it was that Ben Reilly got his name. And what this does is it actually picks up with Ben Reilly kind of making his way and just kind of going through and trying to figure out what it is that he's going to do when he's on a bus. Ultimately, the bus ends up stopping. They kind of get into a wreck on a rainy night or something like that, and they end up having to stay in a hotel. But Ben Reilly actually comes upon a guy by the name of Clifford Gross. And Clifford Gross is kind of this guy who's down on his luck and really has nothing going on. I mean, this guy's life sucks. Like, his wife left him, his kids left him, they took all the money. I mean, the guy's got nothing on him. But it's really kind of an interesting scenario because this pits Spider-Man, or Peter Parker as we would traditionally think of him, in direct juxtaposition with Ben Reilly. Because Ben Reilly is just kind of trying to navigate his own life while effectively knowing or believing he's a clone of Peter Parker. And so because of this led directly to him just kind of lashing out, yelling at him, giving Clifford a hard time and so on and so forth, sort of lashing out in a bar. And that's really about it. Things kind of wrap up fast, but he ends up going back to a room, or at least when his spider sense goes off, he breaks into a room and finds Clifford's going to, end his life. And so, of course, Ben Reilly basically stops him from doing that. But what this does is it sets Ben Reilly's life in the motion of becoming a good guy. Now, between this backup feature going into the official start of the Clone Saga, which was Web of Spider-Man number 117, Ben Reilly was off kind of doing his own thing. But with regards to the actual Spider-Man landscape, what we ended up finding out here was that Aunt May was basically, she'd suffered a heart attack and she was on the verge of dying. And so the idea was that Marvel wanted to actually kill off her character. Now, this is, again, one of the funny things about the Clone Saga, because this is not an event. Like, it's not Civil War, it's not, House of M, it's not anything along those lines. This was designed by Marvel to basically come back and say, let's get rid of Peter Parker. Because remember, this is the mid-1990s. So Marvel's whole, oh my God, we're on the verge of bankruptcy kind of thing is really running awry. And it was one of these moments when Marvel kind of looked around and said, okay, maybe the reason why our sales are struggling financially is because of the fact that everything is stale. So let's get rid of Peter Parker. Let's eliminate him. Let's bring back Ben Reilly, the clone from the Amazing Spider-Man 149, and let's have him take the place of Peter Parker and write Peter Parker out. That was supposed to be a short-knit, really quick method of storytelling. The problem was that this story proved to be so popular that editorial stepped in and they said, just keep it going. Write whatever you have to write. Write a comic about the sun setting. We don't care what you do, but just keep it going. And so what initially started out as what was likely supposed to be, a 10 or 11 issue storyline turned into 200 plus. And by the time it was all said and done, it was so insane that people were just like, this, it boggled the mind. People didn't even know where to begin, because Marvel at the time this story was written was publishing 4 different Spider-Man stories, some of which were losing their titles and being changed over to new titles. So imagine that you're reading Spider-Man and then suddenly Spider-Man becomes Peter Parker Spider-Man and you're totally lost in terms of where you're supposed to go because the numbering remains the same or something along those lines, and it confused the heck out of people. But in terms of the actual Clone Saga, the official start of this, Ben Reilly returns to New York. And the reason why is because of the fact that he learns about the fact that Aunt May's sick and is almost done with all her living. Now, the reason why this matters is because of the fact that going into this road of redemption for Ben Reilly, he was basically catching up and he was trying to find a way to do the right thing or trying to be a good guy. So he genuinely cares about the Parker family. I mean, we found out, at the end of Spectacular Spider-Man 223 in that backup feature, that when he was asked what his name was, he took the first name of Uncle Ben and he took the last name of Aunt May before she was married and just called himself Ben Reilly. He genuinely cares about the Parker family. He doesn't really see himself as Peter Parker, but he still has memories of a life he never lived. He has all the memories of Peter Parker. So he remembers everything he was taught, by Uncle Ben. He remembers Peter Parker, the emotions he felt, the experiences he had when Uncle Ben died. And so what this does is, with his arrival, it immediately pits Ben Reilly and Spider-Man against one another. And the reason why that's kind of cool is because, remember, Peter Parker, as far as he's aware, Ben Reilly's dead. The clone's gone. He has no reason to believe that it's still there. It's effectively gone forever. And so because of this, in the midst of their conflict, Ben Reilly basically unmasks Peter Parker Parker and says, you know exactly who I am. I'm your clone. Now, of course, this brings back all the memories that Peter Parker has of the original Clone Saga from Amazing Spider-Man 149, and it sets in motion the entirety of the Clone Saga event, because Peter Parker believes he's the genuine one. Like, he's like, I'm the real Peter Parker. But it creates a really kind of confusing situation for him, because with Ben Reilly having returned, now the question is Peter the clone, and is Ben Reilly the real one? That was the whole basis of the Clone Saga. That was the whole idea, was to basically set things in motion and kind of cause a little bit of panic here and there. Now, of course, what this ended up doing is it also introduced a guy by the name of Judas Traveler. Now, this guy had a couple of appearances here and there. He was one of like the side plots that went on during the events of Clone Saga, because again, that's one of the reasons why Clone Saga was so confusing. You had the overarching Clone Saga event, and then you had all these small events that took place during the story, because again, it was supposed to be a new shift, a new status quo that was supposed to happen. So of course, essentially what had happened is Judas Traveler had taken over Ravencroft Asylum, which is where all the, some of the craziest members that Spider-Man has to face are, basically reside at. Carnage and Shriek and so on and so forth. And so it's basically this scenario, kind of this gauntlet, so to speak, that if Peter Parker loses, he'll die. If Judas Traveler loses, he'll win, so on and so forth. But again, this was just designed for the purpose of bringing in the character of Peter. At the same time this was happening, Marvel began to focus more on the Ben Reilly character. And so what Ben Reilly had basically done is working alongside Peter Parker, at least once they got their kind of issues resolved and once they stopped fighting each other and started teaming up, Ben Reilly went forward as a new version of Spider-Man called Scarlet Spider. Now, the cool thing about Scarlet Spider is that he's got his own costume, and it is amazing. Like, Scarlet Spider's costume looks so cool. It's like this 1990s, I'm hip, kind of thing. But the actions of Ben Reilly running around as Peter Parker also drew the attention of some of his own villains, most namely Venom. Now, at the same time that this was going on with regards to Venom kind of tracking down Ben Reilly, it also brought into fray the idea of Marvel expanding on the symbiotes themselves, which introduced a character named Scream. Now, she's not of any real importance here. She was a blip on the radar. She showed up for a little while. Nobody cared. She went away. I just kind of bring that up to show you guys that there was a huge expansion to the Spider-Man landscape under Clone Saga. And really, things were just kind of spiraling out of control. That's one of the reasons why I bring this up. But the other half of this is that the name Scarlet Spider was not something Ben Reilly organically called himself, right? Like, he didn't put on his costume and say, now I'm Scarlet Spider. He put on his costume, and the Daily Bugle started calling him Scarlet Spider, because all they knew is there were basically two Spider-Men. There was the traditional Spider-Man that we have with the traditional costume, and then there was a new Spider-Man on the scene, and the two of them were working together. Now, of course, the Daily Bugle, being a newspaper that engages in fear-mongering and so on and so forth, began asking questions like, are they in cahoots with one another? Do we have a new criminal in the city of New York? But what this also did is it began to sort of tease the idea of Kane. Now, Kane was an interesting character. We'll get more about him later on. I'll get more into him later on. But Kane was a guy who basically just sort of showed up and was there for a little bit and didn't really do a whole lot, lingering in the background and watched things unfold. And that was really about it. That's really all there was to it. And so because of that, Kane doesn't actually have any real fleshing out, any major role to play until we end up getting to like the actual Kane story itself. But getting back to Ben Reilly, we're kind of doing this weird situation, this weird hybrid kind of video where it's like half telling the story and then like half explaining things. It's kind of a weird scenario. I'm not really used to doing this, so hopefully it works out. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down as we go through this. But again, with Scarlet Spider, with Ben Reilly kind of acting as Spider-Man and doing, or at least acting as a version of Spider-Man, acting as Scarlet Spider, this was kind of a gradual introduction. That was the goal of Marvel, was to not just go cold turkey. Marvel couldn't just drop, Peter Parker Spider-Man all of a sudden. I mean, they couldn't just have Ben Reilly show up, Ben Reilly beats him to death, and then he's like, I'm Spider-Man now. That wouldn't really work. People would lose their minds. You had to gradually work them in. And so the best way to do that was to have Ben Reilly become Scarlet Spider, have Peter Parker remain Spider-Man, and then have some event take place where Peter Parker Spider-Man says, okay, now I'm done being Spider-Man, and Ben Reilly takes over the mantle. That's exactly what they do, and we'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge once we get to it. But the fact remains here that, again, because of the fact that, Ben Reilly as Scarlet Spider is running around, being his own hero, doing his own thing, eventually Venom catches up to him. Now, the fight between Scarlet Spider and Venom is actually really kind of cool, because in a lot of ways, Scarlet Spider doesn't really pull any punches. He's not the same as Peter Parker. He has a lot of the same beliefs, the same memories, so on and so forth, but he's also a little more ruthless. He's also willing to do things that Peter Parker isn't really willing to do. In this instance, he's more aggressive when he goes against Venom. He's more hostile when he goes against Venom. A couple of his gadgets are a little bit different. And so Venom's not quite used to going against this iteration of Spider-Man. But at the same time, once Venom's basically just kind of like wrapped up and is just kind of left by Scarlet Spider, ultimately we end up having Venom just kind of come to this realization that after engaging directly with Scarlet Spider, that his suspicions are confirmed. Scarlet Scarlet Spider is not the real Peter Parker. And so again, this is kind of a cool scenario because it's one of these things where it's like the plot thickens. How do the various villains of Spider-Man react to a version of Peter Parker that's not the real Peter Parker? How do they react to Ben Reilly, aka Scarlet Spider? And so again, with the two of them kind of facing off against one another, and it's pretty short-lived, it's pretty hardcore. At the end of the day, Venom is effectively defeated. Scarlet Spider is able to bring him down. But the reason why this matters is because of the fact that this is like the first major villain of Spider-Man that Scarlet Spider's faced off against. And so what Ben Reilly does in this scenario is he sort of looks around. He looks at the legacy of Peter Parker, all the things that he's done. He's looked around at all the different villains that he's faced, Kraven the Hunter and so on and so forth. And in his mind, he's stepping up into the mantle of Spider-Man. Even if he's not donned the official Spider-Man uniform, he's still pretty much acting the exact same way. But the other half of this is that while all this is going on, the character of Kane is watching it all unfold. He's watching it all happen. Again, kind of remaining in the shadows, kind of remaining hidden. And that's the way his character was. Again, we'll talk about him once we get into the Kane video, but that's the way his character was. He remained hidden almost the entire time. Like he was just in the background. You'd see him in a panel over here. You'd see him in a panel over there. You'd see a panel that would focus on him, but you would never get any explanation on who he was or what he was about. He was just there, this super enigmatic, mysterious guy. All that was eventually fleshed out, but it created this question of who is Kane? What's going on with Kane? Who is this guy? What's he about? And is he yet another clone of Spider-Man? But with that being said, guys, hopefully that explains things and wraps things up pretty well with the character of Ben Reilly. Again, we're not done with him yet. There's still more to go with the character of Ben Reilly, but I feel like that's a pretty good opening salvo for the whole Clone Saga to give you guys an idea of everything that's going on. Again, we would have done this in our traditional form, but the problem is in order to do that, we'd have to cover all 200 some odd issues of the whole Clone Saga, and it is an absolute mess. So we're really just kind of hitting the important points and going forward from there. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.
Okay, guys, that was Comics Explained, and I'm going to now quickly try and find that remote control again. Find that video of Kane, as I think it needs to be done, as that's what we're drawing right now. Another clone of Spider-Man. I thought it was Scarlet Spider-Man, so I'll do apologize for that, but it was Kane. See if we can find Kane's story now. It doesn't lead straight on to it. So, oh, there we go. Whole load of stories, guys. Search them up on the internet, and there's their names. The story of Kane. Let's wonder if this one's any good. This one is Comic Island.
Miles Warren was a genius professor at biology who once secretly fell in love with Gwen Stacy. Following her tragic death, the man was driven to madness and he became a villain. Calling himself the Jackal, he swore revenge on the person he thought responsible for Gwen's death, Spider-Man. The Jackal would fight Spider-Man through cloning technology, and Kane was the former professor's first cloned experiment. Due to a flawed procedure, the clone was left deformed and mentally unstable. The Jackal would reject Kane for this reason, and his creation would experience a strong sense of abandonment because of this. Kane would eventually find remnants of the Jackal's old files, and, due to tampering by Norman Osborn, was led to incorrectly believing that Ben Reilly is the original Spider-Man and Peter Parker is the clone. Kane therefore chose to follow Ben Reilly as he left New York City, and eventually fell in love with a woman in Salt Lake City. When the clone discovers that she has criminal ties, Kane, who is experiencing increased cellular and mental deterioration, kills the woman he loves. In his despair, Kane decides to give Peter Parker, who he believes is a fellow clone, the life he could never have, and frames Ben Reilly for a number of murders by taking advantage of the fact that they all have the same fingerprints. Eventually, this would backfire, and Peter would be sent to prison, but Ben Reilly agrees to take Peter's place. Kane meanwhile wanders New York, fighting old Spider-Man villains, including Kraven and Dr. Octopus. The clone even went so far as to begin executing Spider-Man's enemies, leading them to unsuccessfully band together in an attempt to stop him. Peter confronts the clone and wants Kane to turn himself in for his action, but he refuses and they fight. Kane reveals who he is to Peter and why he's killed so many people, so Spider-Man threatens to go public with his own identity if Kane refuses to reveal the truth. Not wanting Peter to ruin his own life, Kane agrees to repent for his actions and ultimately work together with Ben Reilly to fight off the various spider clones that were eventually created by the Jackal. During this battle, Kane is nearly killed by one of the clones, but he is saved by his creator, the Jackal, who feels momentarily guilty for all he's done to his first specimen. Kane is eventually freed and, encouraged by the actions of Ben Reilly, agrees to turn himself over to the law and face his past mistakes. It is revealed that cellular degradation is finally killing the clone, so Kane is hospitalized. He would eventually escape when he discovers that the entire clone saga was engineered by Norman Osborn, who also murdered his brother Ben Reilly. However, Kane was not successful at finding Osborn and disappears. Kane is one of the few people on the planet who retains knowledge of Peter's identity after the events of One More Day, though he maintains a rocky relationship with Peter Parker. The clone would wind up working together with Peter during a hunt for various spider-themed heroes started by the Kravinoff family. Kane would ultimately sacrifice himself to save Peter, though the unique circumstances of the clone's death led to his immediate resurrection. However, as a result of this, Kane was further mutated and captured by the Jackal, so the villain could further experiment on his old creation, leading to even more of a mutation in Kane's genetic structure. By the time of Spider Island, Kane has been mutated into a being with a man's body, a spider head, a full coat of spider hair, and 4 legs growing out of his back. The Jackal dubs Kane with the new code name Tarantula and puts him under control of the Spider Queen. The Queen sends him to Horizon Labs to corrupt a cure being developed there, but Tarantula is overpowered and submerged in a concentrated form of the cure. Kane emerges, now a fully cured and seemingly perfect clone just like Ben Reilly once was. The restored clone works with Peter and the Avengers to save New York City, only for Kane to discover that he has grown stingers and abilities similar to those Peter developed during the other storyline. After the Spider Island event, the Parker clone decides to leave New York City, take up the mantle of the Scarlet Spider, and begins operating out of Houston, Texas. Kane would have some success as a hero, fighting off human traffickers, Kraven Hunter's daughter Anna, and even the Roxxon Energy Corporation. During this time period, Kane would undergo a similar experience and transformation that Spider-Man went through earlier, and would become a receptacle for the mysterious entity known as the Other. The hero would also briefly join the New Warriors team, confronting the likes of the High Evolutionary and magically powered refugees. While working with the New Warriors in Eastern Europe, Kane was attacked by Deimos of the Inheritors as part of the Spider-Verse event. The Inheritors are a powerful family of vampires who travel across the multiverse hunting animal-themed superheroes, particularly those with powers associated with spiders. The attacking Deimos is defeated, and Kane impales him with spikes protruding from the clone's arm. The hero is assisted by various other versions of Spider-Man, which shocks Kane as this group includes another version of both Ben Reilly and Gwen Stacy. Together, the Spider-Man are able to escape to another world. Kane joins up with a massive gathering of Spider-Men from across the multiverse. He would gain a mission along with Ben Reilly and Jessica Drew to destroy the cloning facility that the Inheritors are using to maintain their immortality. They are successful at shutting down the facility, but Ben Reilly is tragically killed in the process. Outraged at another Ben Reilly dying without being able to do anything about it, Kane travels to the home of the Inheritors. Unleashing the full power of the Other entity, Kane transforms into a giant creature and kills the head of the Inheritors family, a vicious man named Solus. However, it appears that this action cost Kane his life, as the clone was seemingly killed when Solus's son, Morlun, uses one of Kane's spider legs to impale the clone in his neck. Kane began his life with powers identical to Spider-Man. However, cellular degradation and consistent exposure to genetic mutation has given the clone some altered and augmented abilities. Kane at times is up to 3 times stronger than that of his original, to the extent he was able to beat Rhino unconscious and hold his own when fighting both Peter Parker and 2 other clones simultaneously. Kane also has the usual powers associated with Spider-Man, including superior speed, stamina, durability, agility, and reflexes compared to that of a normal human, as well as the wall-crawling abilities that Spider-Man is famous for. Kane's mental control over his wall crawling is so strong that he can rip down a wall just by tugging at it hard enough with his palms. Kane also possesses a mark which lets him leave a severe burn on the body simply through skin-to-skin contact. This mark of Kane appears to be under complete control of its user, as he has fine enough control over this ability that he can even use it to shave and give himself a haircut. Kane originally had 2 stingers on the back of each of his hands, but after the event of Spider Island, these were altered slightly and he can now project multiple spikes through his forearms. Spider Island would also leave Kane with the ability to see in the dark. The clone can also produce organic webbing, and he has limited control over spiders and insects. He is also immune to Spider-Man's spider sense, much like Venom or Carnage, as the sense recognizes Kane as a clone. Finally, Kane can transform into the entity known as the Other, a powerful being that resembles the gruesome man-spider. This connection allows Kane the unique ability to inflict pain on the inheritors. Kane is also an excellent fighter. Though he lacks formal training, he possesses the unusual fighting style that Spider-Man has developed. However, Kane is known for a slightly more brutal technique that takes full advantage of his speed and agility. Kane is also just as smart as Spider-Man, possessing the same ingenuity and creativity. He also knows how to speak a little bit of Spanish and Japanese. The hero uses Spider-Man's old stealth suit, which has been further modified. It allows Kane to turn invisible and is immune to sonic attacks. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my origin and bio for Kane. So this character was requested some time ago. As part of my ongoing Spider-Verse themed origins and bios, this felt like a natural fit, as pretty much anything spawning out of the Clone Saga is generally confusing and not well understood among Spider-Man fans, so this sort of thing seems like it could be quite helpful. For those unfamiliar with the Clone Saga, it's a particularly dark time in Spider-Man history, and one that I consider so badly screwed up that in my opinion it's the second biggest disaster in Spider-Man comics to date. Stay away from the Clone Saga if you know what's good for you. I tried to make the story as consistent and straightforward as possible in this video, but I still don't think I fully understand this complex, drawn-out, and badly written event. So if it was a little confusing, I apologize. I did the best I could. As a result, Kane is not exactly a character for whom I'd recommend you go out and read his backstory thoroughly. It's just not worth the headache, as Kane's winding, complex story is far more frustrating than fun to me. But few titles I can recommend are the ones that Kane is merely a supporting character in a bigger and better story. The Grim Hunt, Spider Island, and Spider-Verse are all good stories that I recommend with Kane in them, even if these aren't the biggest stories in Kane's life. Those are worth checking out, and I'll include these stories in the Amazon links that we have started to add to our video descriptions. And that's about all I have to really say on Kane. I've never been that attached to this character, so I wasn't overly sad seeing him get killed off in Spider-Verse, and it's not like he can't just come back at some point. Personally, I think his heroic and crazy end was actually a pretty good one, as I didn't really expect it to take out what I thought was going to be the main villain of Spider-Verse. So I don't really mind if this is the end of Kane's story, though I have a feeling we'll see him again. Other than that, feel free to suggest future origins and bios you'd like to see us cover. I have one more that I want to do for Spider-Verse, and after that, I think it's time to invest in some long-requested coverage of characters and teams not directly tied to Spider-Man for a little while, as I'm sure you're all getting a little tired of me just going over Spider-related origin stories. If you'd like to know more about the Spider-Verse event, you can check out our website, which has the full reading order for Spider-Verse with all of Joey's recaps and reviews of each issue. You can find a link to our site and Facebook page in the video description below. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.
Again, guys, I do listen to other people in the background, so he gave himself a introduction, and that's who that was. Comic Island, I think his name, Comic Island, I do believe, yeah. But that's bringing in today's stream. Hopefully you have enjoyed. I'm going to be trying to do 2 a day. Yesterday was Miles Morales and Spidey 2099. And I did do the anti-venom suit off stream as a tester to see what this app could do on this page that I'm using now. But hopefully you've enjoyed the story rip here you heard in the background by comic historian of Noir Spider-Man. And if you want to learn any more about that, then let me know and I'll do some research and I'll put out a full video, or just have them particular ones playing in the background and maybe tweaking a little bit more to the Spider Noir. But you heard Kane. Kane is a mystery to me, and I thought he was in the picture, and I thought it's an interesting one to draw and a lot more easier because he has no webs on his actual costume, which is an actual pain if you we'll see further on in the videos. But tomorrow we will be doing what's this one now? Spider-Man 1688 comic novel. I'm going to find out a little bit more about that one. I'm going to do a lot more research on that one, because it's a graphic novel and it's only one hit story, and it doesn't really appear much in it, but it does appear enough in it. So we may have him as the beginning. We will continue on with that game that you saw at the very beginning as well, guys. So if you want to watch that at the beginning, don't forget to hit subscribe. Hit that bell so you know when I've uploaded or I've gone live, because the videos may be uploaded from now on, and because of time issues and when I'll be able to actually use my television, as my son is coming back from Christmas holidays with his mum and his nan. So we will be getting to making some more videos up in the Minecraft. But again, I've got more technology to be shared, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button. My name is Blut084. BLUT084, Art and Games, here every day on YouTube, occasionally on Mixer, but every day and night over on Instagram. I will be sharing these pictures so you can see them better if you can't see them that well over on Instagram. So don't forget to hit to go over there. And if you want a link to go over there, guys, don't forget to ask one down in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll say goodbye for now. My name is Blut084, BLUT084, Art and Games.